We're starting. Please sit, please. No cell phones. Thanks very much. Oh my, got very quiet. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sandra Plotin, and on behalf of CSUN Center on Disabilities, I would like to officially welcome you to the 34th Annual Assistive Technology Conference. Just because we're in a new home doesn't mean I don't have to remind you that we are the oldest, largest, and only university-sponsored event of this kind. Many of you come here because you recognize that this is the place where we can collaborate with friends, researchers, consumers, practitioners, government reps, great speakers, and amazing exhibitors. And of course, you know we are the best venue for networking. Before we move on, I want to take a quick minute to remind everyone that if you want the most accurate information on the conference, please sign up for our mailing list. That way you will get announcements and reminders about deadlines and other important information. And if you go to our website, and here's a really great idea, read the information on there, 99.99% of what you need to know is posted there. And check out our social media. We love when you retweet us, and help us spread the word about announcements and deadlines and important dates, but we'd like if when the information comes from us. So please, and I'm begging here, do me a favor and start at the source and get your conference news from CSUN, and you will make an old lady very happy. I thought it would get more than that. And, and something else that makes me happy is the team that puts this together every year, all year, and on site. So if everybody, and it's only 6 other people, could stand up from the COD team so we could acknowledge your efforts, please. And there's one behind the curtain, Sean. And I also want to do one nice shout out to our supporters at Student Affairs. If you don't know our conference chair, Jennison Asuncion, you're probably a newcomer. I think the best way to describe Jennison would be with the criteria used for the Stephen Garf Marriott Award he received in 2018. This award honors a blind or visually impaired individual who has a demonstrated history of high achievement in their respected field and has the following characteristics: drive, fortitude, success, service as a mentor and trainer. Jennison spent over 12 years working with Canadian banks to help them achieve their goal of making web, Windows desktop, and mobile and tablet experiences accessible. In 2013, he relocated to Silicon Valley when he was recruited to join LinkedIn. As engineering manager, Jennison directs the company's digital accessibility efforts across the web and mobile platforms and oversees the team of software engineers who support the same. Since 1998, he has been the co-director of the Adapt Tech Research Network, where he's focused on the use and accessibility of information and communication technology for post-secondary students with disabilities. In 2012, he co-founded the annual Global Accessibility Awareness Day, an annual grassroots effort to raise awareness of digital accessibility for people with different kinds of disabilities. Seriously, I don't know when Jennison sleeps. He's founded multiple accessibility camps, Toronto in 2011, Bay Area in 2014, LA in 2012, which we were proud to host at CSUN, and I guess he had one this weekend I didn't even know about. These free day-long events gather developers and designers to discuss digital accessibility issues. For his professional, research, and community efforts, Jennison was recognized as a 2011 Microsoft Accessibility Technology for Everyone champion. And then in 2012, and wait for this, he was honored by the Royal Bank of Canada and the Government of Canada with the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal, which is why you'll sometimes hear us call him Lord J. In one of our early years in San Diego, Sean, the man behind the curtain, told me that I needed to meet Jennison, and I did, and the rest is history. In 2015, Jennison found some spare time to join the Conference Advisory Council and has been program chair for the General Sessions track for the last 2 years. I'm tired from just talking about almost everything he does, and yes, there is more, and if you want to find out more, where do you think you might find it? On his LinkedIn page. And there's my plug. So please join me in welcoming our 2019 conference chair, Jennison Asuncion.
We staged this because I wanted to see if I could scare Sandy into thinking I'd fall off the stage. So by way of a little bit of audio description to my fellow Braille users in the audience and to everyone else who thinks, even though technology is king here at this conference, Braille is in fact not dead. Yeah, I have a mini stack of Braille notes in my hands for other folks here who are blind. So again, first things first, I want you to again join me in thanking Sandra Plotin and the entire staff for putting this together. This is like planning for the largest wedding that you can think of, and those of you who've had to help plan weddings, it's tough. So please join me once again, thanking Sandy and everyone. I'm really excited to welcome you to our new home here in Anaheim, a shuttle ride away from Disney, and it's kind of a homecoming because my very first CSUN conference was back in Los Angeles, closer to the airport, back in 1994, as a college student who was just here and taking things in for the first time. So, speaking of first times, if this is your very first conference, I want you to make noise or wave or both in just a second. For everyone else in the room, I want you to take notice of those people who are making noise. So if this is your first time, wave or make some noise. All right. So everyone else in this room, it is your responsibility after this event to go up to one of those noisemakers and make them feel welcome. Thank you for coming. I've got 3 asks, and then we'll get to the business at hand. The first ask is for each of you to attend at least one session that has nothing to do with your day-to-day responsibilities or your day-to-day interests. You have an opportunity here to check out sessions on a whole host of different digital topics, assistive technology, from aging to deafness, all and everything in between. I always learn stuff. So please take that opportunity to take on at least one session that is outside of your area. Number 2, make some time to visit the exhibit hall. There are some amazing new technologies and some contests that are worth checking out. So please do that. And number 3, as much as everyone's going to overschedule themselves in sessions, I want you to really take some time to have those hallway conversations. Those are the kinds of conversations that can only happen here, and you just never know where those conversations might lead. So now on to the fun business at hand, some awards. So each year, the CSUN Center on Disabilities honors an individual with the Fred Strache Leadership Award. This year's recipient, Sean Keegan, clearly represents the dedication and commitment to helping improve the educational landscape for students with disabilities. Sean Keegan is a leader, Sean Keegan directs the California Community College's Accessibility Center and has been involved in accessibility and technology topics for nearly 19 years. Sean began learning about web accessibility in the late 90s during graduate school after developing some rather inaccessible content for his blind graduate advisor. Returning to California, Sean found an opportunity as the Web Accessibility Training Specialist for the High-Tech Center Training Unit for the California Community Colleges. You say that 20 times. Here, he developed training for faculty and staff in the areas of accessible web design, captioning, accessible document production, and accessible computer technologies, all to increase access and expand opportunities for students with disabilities. Following his work there with the California Community College system, Sean became Assistant Director for the Assistive Technology in the Office for Accessible Education at Stanford University, overseeing the implementation of assistive technology throughout the campus and developing the alternative format production program. Now back with the California Community Colleges, Sean is leading the California Community Colleges Accessibility Center, a grant-funded resource from the California Community College's Chancellor's Office. Located at Butte College, the center provides technical assistance, professional development, and guidance to the community college system on information and communication technology accessibility topics, and ultimately to improve access for current and prospective students attending within these institutions. Sean is past president of the Access Technology Higher Education Network, or ATHEN, an organization focusing on assistive technology solutions for students with disabilities in higher education. And Sean also participates in a number of other working groups involved in higher education and accessibility. I am really honored because I know him, and so I am pleased, and please welcome Sean Keegan to the stage to receive his Fred Strache Award. This is what the Oscars feels like, isn't it?
I am truly humbled by this. Growing up, my parents encouraged my siblings and I to always get engaged, to participate in our communities, sports, after-school programs, volunteer groups, and the like. And when I began 19 years ago in this field, doing some rather inappropriate website development for a professor, I became interested in this area and started down a path to meeting this community. And I can tell you it has been an absolute privilege to work with many of you over the last many years. Your dedication, your willingness to help answer questions, to investigate problems, to debate, sometimes passionately, on various access issues is tremendous. And at the heart of this, it is not so much meeting a technical standard, but it is you who looks beyond those technical requirements for how we build that inclusive society. So thank you very much. I am truly honored by this. Thank you for the recognition of this. Thank you very much.
And if I could ask my fellow council, advisory council colleague, Klaus Miesenberger, to join me on stage to present the Art Karshmer Award. Klaus.
Thank you, Jennison, but I'm not the winner. CSUN endowed the Award for Assistive Technology Research in memory of our dear friend and outstanding colleague, Dr. Art Karshmer, a real pioneer in the field of assistive technology research. His mission was to exploit the full potential of new technologies for a better inclusion of people with disabilities in a cyclic process from basic research, user-centered research over development towards application. Together with Art, I had the privilege to be a member of the advisory council of this wonderful conference, allowing us to work on setting up the scientific track and scientific journal to support the participation of the science and research community and making CSUN not the only, but the one conference and place where really all stakeholders in the value chain could participate. We are proud seeing the scientific track and the journal growing in terms of number of submissions, in particular quality of scientific work, what helps us to accomplish our mission. The Dr. Arthur Karshmer Award for Assistive Technology Research goes to the authors of the best submission to the journal track. Award winners are recognized for their exemplary submission and excellence in research, pushing the advancement of assistive technologies forward. It is with this award that we honor Dr. Arthur Karshmer's extensive experience, commitment, and passion in our field, and continue his legacy of innovative research improving the quality of life of people with disabilities. The scientific track accepts the best papers only. This award honors the best of the best. This year, 2019, the second Dr. Arthur Karshmer Award for IT research goes to the paper, this is like Oscar, Use of mHealth Technologies for People with Vision Impairment by Shepherd Center and Duke University. I call up Nicole Thompson and John Morris. Congratulations. Congratulations. I have only one, but I'm sure you can share it together.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really nice.
Thank you, Klaus. Thank you to our co-authors, Mike Jones at Shepherd Center and Frank DeRuyter at Duke University, co-principal investigators of the Live Well Rehabilitation Engineering Research Center, or Live Well RERC. Thank you to the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research, NIDLR, for funding our research. And thank you to CSUN and the CSUN Conference. And thank you to the CSUN Journal staff and editors for their hard work in producing this very important publication. And last but not least, we certainly thank the participants for their time and entrusting us with their experiences and their stories.
I have a few comments. So we're delighted and humbled to receive the Arthur I. Karshmer Award for Assistive Technology Research. Dr. Karshmer set the example for commitment to accessibility research. Towards the end of a long and distinguished career as a researcher, engineer, teacher, and pioneer in accessible and assistive technology, Dr. Karshmer issued this call to action, quote, "I hope that my colleagues and I leave behind a firm foundation for the next generation of believers to stand on, to build a world that's accessible to everyone, regardless of their challenges." So Dr. Karshmer's words and spirit remind us that while winning this prestigious award is an occasion to be celebrated and remembered fondly, a moment that we will cherish always, it is also a challenge, a call to action to continue to build that firm foundation, that world that is accessible to everyone. Winning this award is a powerful reminder of our need to strive every day to live up to the example set by Dr. Karshmer. Thank you.
Sandy, I didn't follow. Okay. I'm going to introduce you now to our keynote. And I'm going to go off script for a second and say that it is truly a privilege, and only at a conference like this where you can have a situation where someone who is totally blind, who is introducing someone who is exceptionally brilliant, who you'll meet in a moment, an engineer who is deaf. So that's kind of cool to me to do that. So Johanna Lucht, Johanna Lucht is the first deaf engineer at NASA to take an active role in the control room during a crewed flight test. I'll have to find out from her more what that's about. That sounds interesting. Johanna was born in Germany to a family of a hearing family, and was not discovered to be deaf until the age of 3. At that time, resources for deaf people were limited, and as a result, she was unable to communicate through much of her childhood. It wasn't until the age of 9 that she learned her first true language, which is American Sign Language. It was her passion for knowledge that led her, to excel in her studies of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. She earned her Bachelor of Science in Computer Science at the University of Minnesota. While a student there, she was accepted to intern at NASA's Armstrong Center. Following her internship, she joined NASA Armstrong's Sensors and Systems Development Branch before transferring to the center's Vehicle Integration and Test Branch in 2016, which designs, integrates, and tests the research systems onto airborne platforms. Throughout her life, Johanna has persisted through school and work to be successful. Her success has been made possible by using various tools, such as assistive technology, accommodation, rapport with people, and most importantly, this is the one I like, a sense of humor. In her spare time, Johanna quilts, crochets, plays video games, walks, and bakes sweets for her to bribe her coworkers. And I did check, she did not bring any of those sweets with her tonight. Please join me in welcoming on stage our keynote for 2019, Johanna Lucht.
Well, hello there, everyone. Good evening. Everything so far so good? Yeah? Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Jennison, for that lovely introduction. I'll tell you again, my name is Johanna Lucht. And the topic I have today to speak to you about is viewing assistive technology through lenses. And I'm asking you to consider refocusing those lenses. Before I delve into my talk, I want to give a thanks to Sandra Plotin for inviting me here today to give this keynote presentation. And also I want to thank all of you, the audience, who've come to watch me speak. Maybe you're only here for the conference or you're interested in the reception afterwards. No judgment. You're here for whatever reasons you're here. And I also want to tell you that though I'm an engineer and I happen to work for NASA, any of the opinions, the perspectives, the descriptions that I offer are mine alone and not any part of NASA policy. So if you're going to hold somebody accountable, you can't fault NASA. It's all on me. Well, maybe. So Jennison gave most of my background by way of introduction, but I have a little more to share with you so you can get a little bit of understanding and familiarity with who I am. You see, I've got pictures of my recent quilt and my crochet project. I call this top one Pink Piggy. It's a hat with curly pigtail ties that you tie under the chin. The next one is a stuffed red one-eyed monster with a toothy fang grin. It's soft. Now the picture is the cookies that we've been talking about. I make the cookies, but I didn't bring you the cookies, but I brought you a picture. And the picture is, it's a sort of a jelly sandwich cookie. Now I'm going to see if the interpreter can get the actual name pronounced correctly, because it's a German word, and it's Spitzbuben. So I don't know if she said this right or not, but I'm going to keep on going. And by the way, the favorite kind of, there's two jellies that I put inside. One is from a homemade blueberry jelly that my mother used to make and gave to me for the cookies. And I think the others are raspberry. So there's a blueberry and a raspberry jelly in these cookies. They're quite delicious. So if I go any further, you're going to get hungry. Sorry. Now, the most recent project that I did is this quilt. I completed it, I call it a rainbow quilt. It's made with ribbons, and it's in a pattern that begins in the center, moves outward in concentric squares with yellow lines separating them, and it's got a black background. Now, I have to tell you, this is a huge quilt. It's 108 inches square, and it's the size of a king-size quilt. And it's quite big, and my parents, for me to take the picture, they had to stand on the second floor and hold it from the balcony so I could step far enough back that I could grab a shot of the entire quilt. Finally, I was able to do that. And I just talked about my parents, so I'm going to show I have my family photo as well. There are 4 of us in the background, my 3 older brothers and myself, and we're wearing Star Wars colored button-down shirts. And my parents are the 2 in the front with the black and white Star Wars button-down shirt. And the parents are holding a board, and it says, "May the Force be with you." Now, I suppose you can tell by looking at, oh, I forgot to mention our Princess Leia buns above our ears. You can see, obviously, that our family has a sense of humor. We're very sarcastic. We laugh quite a bit. And in fact, if you don't have the sense of humor, you're going to get kicked out of the family. But apparently, I haven't been kicked out, so I must be doing something right. Now, we were talking about my childhood and how I was raised in Germany. And I'm showing you a picture of Europe, and I've got all of the countries in gray, with the exception of the one in red, which is Germany, to highlight it. And I lived there till I was 12 years old. Now, Jennison was mentioning that I didn't learn any language until I was 9 years old. And you might wonder, how did I communicate with my family? It's a good question. And I remember as I was young, gesturing, using my face, my body language. I didn't know sign language. I didn't know English. I didn't know how to speak. I couldn't read or write. We just had body language to communicate. It was quite frustrating. My parents tried to learn American Sign Language from a book, but it's very hard because sign language is a three-dimensional language, and to try to compress it into two-dimensional on a page, it's really quite impossible to learn from that. My mom told me, I remember when I was very little, I might have been 5 or 6, and I hated to go to school. I didn't want to go to school because it was too frustrating for me without communication. And so my mother was trying to get me and convince me to go to school, and she said to me, you know, if you don't go to school, Mama's going to be in jail. She used that sign of being behind the bars at a jail. Well, I didn't like seeing that. I didn't want to lose my mom, so I went ahead and went to school. It was something I'll remember always. Thanks, Mom. Now, when I was 12 years old, well, let me go back just a minute. At the age of 9, I finally went to school, and they hired an interpreter, and that interpreter had deaf parents, was very fluent in sign language, and was a great language model for me. I was able to pick up ASL very quickly, and English followed shortly behind. School was a lot of work. At the age of 12, then, we moved to America. And on the map of America, I've got all the states in gray with the exception of 3 that are significant to me. The first being Alaska, the second, Minnesota, and the third, California. When I moved to Alaska at the age of 12, I completed middle school and high school and graduated. And then I went to Minnesota, where I attended the University of Minnesota. And the summer after my junior year, had an internship at Armstrong Air Force Flight Research Center. And I came back, completed my degree, and I was hired on. And I have that position there, and I have worked since June of 2014, so we're nearly 5 years now there. Wow. Thank you. So that's a little about my background, and I'm hoping that helps you understand the kind of person that I am as I move forward. Now, I've talked enough about myself, okay? Let's get to the subject, assistive technology. It's the reason you're here, right? Well, what is assistive technology? I think there's a couple of perspectives as we approach it. The first perspective would be one that the law provides. So this is from the IDEA law, Individuals with Disabilities Educational Act, passed in 2004. And it's a section 300.5. And I invite you to go ahead and read it, or you can listen to it being spoken, or you can watch me sign it. Assistive technology deals with devices, and it means that any item or piece of equipment or product system, whether acquired commercially, off the shelf, modified, or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of a child with a disability. The term does not include a medical device that is surgically implanted or a replacement of such device. So this is the way society views assistive technology. Now, a second outlook might be the following. When you look at the dictionary, Webster defines assistive as providing aid or assistance. And assistance means the act of helping or assisting someone or the help supplied. the help supplied in the act of assisting. So assistive is focusing on the help itself. And again, keep these definitions in mind as we move forward. Now, I'm going to have some interest in looking at the different perceptions, and we're going to have some audience participation now, okay? I'm going to give you a sentence, and I'm going to ask you to respond as to whether or not you consider the sentence that I show you to be true. Now, if you think what I'm telling you is true, I want you to raise your hands, or you can nod your head, or you can make a shouting noise and say yes. So I'm going to allow you to read that sentence. And then I'm going to take a tally of how much of the room believe that. And then I'll ask if you believe the sentence to be false. Then I'll have you respond. And then those people will lower their hands, and I'll give another tally. Now stay in your seats, be comfortable, no need to stand. I think just some sort of a affirmative nod or a negative shake. Okay, let's have a practice round on this, okay? Now, what could the question be? I am a really funny person. Johanna is a really funny person. Who thinks that's a true statement? Okay, raise your hands if you think. Most people in the audience, well, I'm going to give it a 90%. Okay. Now, who thinks that's a false statement? Go ahead. Okay, I don't see anybody's face, so you don't have to worry. I'm not going to come after you later. Well, it seems that most people get the point here, okay? So are you ready to jump into the real thing? Assistive technology is used by disabled people only. Who thinks that's true? Okay. Now, who thinks that's false? All of you, wow. Okay, we had no one, and you're all correct. But I'm still going to go ahead and give you my opinion in spite of that. Let's take a look. I've got a couple of pictures that have just appeared. On the top, you see the CC or the closed caption icon. You'll often see that on a DVD, or if you're watching it, or maybe you're watching a show or a movie, and you'll see that symbol. Now, able-bodied people, or somebody who can hear and can see, say you're in a sports bar, for example, and people are all milling about, and it's ruckus all around you, and you're watching your favorite sports team, and you're trying to cheer them on, and you're looking at the TV, but you can't actually hear what the sportscaster is saying, and you want to know what's going on, but there's too much noise around, so you realize that you've got a captioning option, and you read what's being said. Do you think that the IDEA law would focus on people being disability? Would they consider that assistive technology to you? Okay, well, it's a closed captioning, and that is assistive technology, but should somebody who's not deaf use it? There could be an argument that in a noisy environment like that, you can't hear, and therefore you're temporarily disabled or at a disadvantage that way. Well, okay, that's one argument. We'll let that pass. But let me give you another scenario. Now you're home, you're in a quiet environment, there's no kids around, nobody's throwing anything, it's very peaceful, and you sit down to watch your favorite TV show. And as you're watching it, suddenly the speakers break down and are off, and you think, oh no, I'm going to miss what they're saying on my show. So you pull out your remote, you press the closed caption device, and now you can watch what's happening. Now your hearing is fine in this scenario. There's no interruption, but you're using the closed captioning. Would IDEA consider that you have the ability to use the captioning? That would be ridiculous if you were limited just because you can hear and you had no disability. Closed captioning benefits everybody, the population for everyone. So that's an example I'm putting out for you. Let me give you another possible idea. Now this is a computer calendar, and it's an image of a daily schedule. And you see how it's color-coded, green, red, blue, And I'm sure there's quite a few of you who use this for meetings. You might use meeting invitations. You don't want to forget when you've got a meeting with your boss, do you? It's pretty important. This is assistive technology, right? Now, maybe the IDEA wouldn't consider that, but if you follow the definition of the word assistive, it certainly is, because it's helping you remember the meeting with your boss so that you don't miss the meeting and get fired. This is helping you keep your job, in essence. This is another example I'm putting out to you, and let me give you another, which is a little further out there, but it makes the point. So this is a picture of an airplane. You remember back in the day when there were no planes, humans might look up and see a bird flying and say, "I wish that I could fly," but a human can't fly. Well, of course, there's the exception, Superman, but that's a different story. Superman can fly, but most humans can't. So as humans, we had to come up with a plan. So what did the Wright brothers do? They developed a design and created the airplane. And now we think nothing of using airplanes. Every day we're on flights. In fact, most of you got here. Who flew here? Okay, there you go. Almost all people. So do you know that the plane is assistive technology for you? Because you can't fly on your own, so you use the plane. Well, is that assistive technology? Now, perhaps you're wondering why I'm going in this direction, and I'm trying to make a point. And I think the main point is that society is too hung up on the definition behind assistive technology. I think people in general don't realize that this technology can also benefit everyone. So back to the question that you've already answered, assistive technology used by disabled people only? No, and you knew that was false. So this next question, and this is another audience participation question, assistive technology is always developed from scratch. Who believes this to be true? No one. Okay. And what about false? I would say 65% said false. And the answer, of course, is false. Now, I'm going to show you how I can validate this. As Jennison described when he introduced me, I'm the first deaf engineer involved in the control room for the aircraft's flight. And this picture shows myself at my work, and I am looking at two computer monitors, my coworkers next to me. One of the monitors shows data, and the other shows an interpreter. Now, I happen to work at the base in Southern California, and the coworker, the interpreter, works in Virginia at the control room. So one of us on the east and one on the west coast. Now, the control room already has telemetry technology where communication is piped from one to the other location. All sound, all video, all pilots' communication with the control room, any video. So the interpreter is getting the same information that I'm getting and able to relate to me what's being audibly spoken. It's sort of like a Skype system. I'm sure you're familiar with that. So this is the technology I use in my control room. Now, this was developed originally for a project 20 years ago, the HyperX project. I'm telling you, it was 20 years ago that this was developed. I'm going to repeat that. That's 20 years ago. I was 7 years old at that time. Now, I hope I'm not making anybody feel badly about the hairs that are turning gray. I'm not intending to make you feel old. But my point is this. 20 years ago, do you think that they thought about working on this project? Someday in 20 years, there may be a deaf engineer who's going to come in and they'll be able to take advantage of this technology. Do you think 20 years later they thought that would be? No, that would have never happened. Okay. They were just focusing on the technology, not on what its future use was. So 20 years ago, we already had this technology, but they used it for a different purpose than I did. So we repurposed it, came up with a new way to use an old technology. A couple of other technologies come to mind. There's some apps. One of them can be used on your phone. It's called Glide, and it was developed originally for people who could hear, or the general population, to do video instant messaging. So it became very popular in the deaf community because people who were deaf are not that comfortable with English sometimes and didn't want to use English texting. They wanted the ability to leave an instant message with video. Now, it wasn't created for deaf people, it was created for the general population, but it was adopted for the use of deaf people. Another application, Uber. That was first developed for people who felt that taxis were too expensive and wanted an affordable ride. Again, nobody was thinking about deaf people at the time of Uber, but the reason that we took it on is that to get a ride, we'd have to call an interpreter at a call center, make the connection, explain where we were, and get all the information. A lot of misunderstandings could happen, and you never knew exactly if the person was going to come and meet up with you. And so with Uber, you get a map, you get a picture of the car, you get a picture of the driver, you get the license plate number, you know exactly where you're going to meet up with the person, and that's why Uber has become so popular with deaf people. So these are different software developments. They aren't created for the disabled population, they're created for the population at large and just adapted, and they work quite well. Now, while you're developing software, there's something that I've noticed, and I don't want to pick on any people if you're here from Amazon, but I'm going to pick on you for a little bit. Anyhow, the point is, the product that I'm thinking of is the Kindle reader. And I don't know if you know this, but they have the ability to increase or decrease the size of the font, and they can also change the text to be black on white or white, inverted to be white on black background. And that's quite a cool technique, and it really helps people with low vision and older people with their sight. So I noticed something, however. People in general, I'm talking about the general population, I'm not talking about companies or people who work in our field, but the general population would call something like that a feature. So this is a feature in the Kindle. They don't use the word accessibility when they talk about it. Companies, I noticed in the program, I was looking through the program book, and our companies seem to call it accessibility characteristics, and I appreciate that, that's good, but the general population is going to call this feature as opposed to using the word accessibility. Now, why are they using a different word? That's a question. Some software might be called assistive technology because it obviously is, like a screen reader, like JAWS. Of course, it's got an obvious purpose, and no one would disagree with that. But I think there's some general software, for example, the Kindle. Why would we use the word accessibility for that, or why wouldn't we? So I thought about that, and I thought, well, maybe there's a subconscious reason. Well, two things came to mind. The first was, it's possible that the people creating it didn't realize that it was going to benefit people with low vision. Maybe they had no concept of that when they created it. But then my other feeling is that somewhere deep in the gut, people have biases. And the bias I'm talking about, I want you to think about. People with disabilities for a long time have been fighting against the negative stigma. People have the tendency to feel sorry for people with disabilities, to look at them in an inferior way, to have pity for them. And we've had to fight that stigma for a long time. So I'm wondering if the people in society have that unconscious feeling that they want to avoid the word. They want to avoid the word accessibility. They want to use the word feature. Maybe you have that unconscious feeling as well. It's okay. I just want you to take a look inside and see, do I have any of those biases? And if I do, where are they from? And what do I do with them? I think it's important because having that kind of bias might prevent the creation of new technology. It might close off new ideas. It's a good start to take a look within, because who knows, you might learn something about yourself along the way. And on that subject, talking about the word assistive technology, so again, I went to my friend, the dictionary, Webster, and flipped through to see how they define access. And there's quite a few definitions, but I chose two. One was a way or a means of entering or approaching. And I'm thinking this is more relates with a physical ability, like a ramp to a building, or like a handrail, or if somebody maybe has a car accident and a leg is shortened from it and they have to have a walker. There's a lot of physical tools that can help. Maybe a way for a blind person using a cane to feel what they need to feel. And the second definition here refers to freedom or ability to obtain or make use of something. So let's take a look at that. I think the second definition applies more to accessibility. Now I know with blind people, Braille would help in that way. Personally, closed caption would give me access to the information around. And I feel, again, the word assistive is very different from the word access. And in my viewpoint, assistive focuses on helping, that a person was in need. And I think it supports that negative stigma, that negative opinion that a person needs help. We're going to give them help. As opposed to access, freedom or the ability to empower the person to make use of something or not. And for me, let me give you an example of that for me in captioning. So say I go into a classroom and the teacher decides to put in a really boring movie and we're watching as a class. I have options now. I can sit through the movie and watch the captioning and follow along with it, or I can say, I don't want to do that and chat with a friend, or I can take notes or do whatever I want to do some homework, or I can sleep on the desk, or if I really want to, I can just leave the entire classroom altogether. Now, see all the choices that I have. Captioning is just one of all of my choices. And if I don't want to use the captioning, I won't. It's there. It's something that's been made available, but I'm not being forced to use it. I'm given the empowerment. It's my decision. So, assistive technology, maybe I would prefer it to be called access technology. Now, some of you might disagree and prefer to keep the word assistive technology, and that's perfectly fine. But in the presentation from now on, I'm going to use both the words, assistive and access technology. So here we're back to an audience participation question. Access assistive technology is always expensive. True. Let's see. I see a couple. 1, 2. I see just a couple. I have 5 takers on this. Okay. And now, false. Okay, most of the audience sees it that way. Well, my answer is it depends. Okay, so I'm going to give you an illustration. Now, this is a picture of a lot of coins, and a plant, a seedling, is growing through the coins. And think of the coins as the investment, the fertilizer of the soil. So without the soil, the plant would die. So the plant would never have a chance. You would never have a chance to see what kind of plant is going to grow out of this seedling. It could grow into a fruit tree, providing food. It could grow into a great, mighty oak tree or maple, strong wood. You could add a swing to the oak tree so a child could swing. Or maybe it's going to be poison ivy and keep the bad people away. But the point being is there's different functions and different abilities that each plant brings. And if you invest in that plant, then you're going to see what that plant has to offer. So the same way that an employer would invest in his employee. You know, when a company hires a new person, they tend to provide training, right? That's their investment for their new employee. Well, why aren't they making investments in people with disabilities through the assistive or access technology? Why is there a different perspective? For those who develop new technologies that are in my audience or take advantage of what exists, I want you to think in terms of universal design. And you know universal design, I can give you a nice illustration. I have a good friend who I think summed it up quite well. Assistive or access technology, the people who have disabilities, well, the able-bodied people are at a higher level, and the people with disabilities has a disadvantage, and then the assistive technology puts the people with a disability at a level playing field with the able-bodied people. Whereas universal design, you're making the playing field equally accessible right from the start. So think about this, and let me give you a good pictorial example. This is a stone wall, a very thick stone wall. Now, imagine yourself going to the zoo to see the animals, the tigers, the elephants, the penguins. You pick whatever animal is your choice, even a giraffe. Now, when you walk up to the wall that divides you from the animals, I'm going to say a wall about chest level. For me, that would be about 4'10" or so. And you're looking at the animals and enjoying their behaviors. There might be children to your left. There might be a person in the wheelchair. There might be a little person. They cannot see through the wall. It's too tall for them. They look at the people that are looking and enjoying themselves, and they say, "Damn those tall people." I might be kidding, but I'm also serious, because they're at a disadvantage. They've paid for their ticket, just as you have, but you're going to have more of an enjoyable experience than they do. It's something to think about. So with assistive technology, how would it solve this problem? There could be a box that's placed that the person could then stand on and be able to see over the fence. But a wheelchair can't use this, so then maybe add a ramp, and then the wheelchair can move up and see the ramp and see that over the edge. Or maybe an elevator if you haven't installed the elevator, and every time you add another device, it's going to have an additional cost. Now, universal design is a different story. Perhaps you set up a chain fence, you know, when you go to watch the sports games. You can see all the way through the fence here. You don't have that obstruction that you had with the stone wall. Or even better, how about, instead of this chain fence, a strong either glass or plexiglass, bulletproof, clear shield? So this is the difference between assistive technology and universal design. Okay, we're done with your audience participation. You can relax now, and I'm going to go on with my presentation. And I want to give some advice here now on those developing assistive or access technology. Include people that have disabilities. Now, make sure that there are people who are interested, respect it if they aren't, but find somebody out there who wants to be a part of your team. These are people who use the technology more than the people who develop the technology, and their feedback can be quite beneficial. They're going to catch things that the original designer sometimes misses. Sometimes a designer finds from feedback a way to go back and redo. It's going to be a cause for improvements in the design. Sometimes I've seen people with disabilities work at a company, for example, and they are the reason for the inspiration for new designs. And I'll tell you a story that happened with my coworker. You're looking up at a G3 airplane. It's created by Gulfstream, an aircraft company. And in the control room, before the flight test, I have to prepare and make sure that all is ready. I look at the airplane, and part of my responsibilities with another coworker, we go on the flight where there are a couple of racks and terminals and all of the data, and we check all the instruments. And often there's an interpreter available to help me communicate with my coworker. But one day, there was not an interpreter, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to communicate with each other. And we didn't want to have to get up and walk to the other person's station and write a note to the other person. But it just so happened, we were trying to think of how to communicate, and the other worker, the coworker, remembered that one time they had had another coworker long before I was there, and that person had installed instant message because they preferred to type rather than talk. So both of these terminals both had instant message on it, which I hadn't realized. And this coworker remembered that when she worked with me in the other room, we often would instant message with each other. So she said, it's already here. She knew what would work for me. She created the idea, pulled it up, and we were able to message each other. And I didn't even know that it was there and wouldn't have known had she not thought for me. So the point here being that a person who worked with me knew that I worked and how I worked, and she was inspired to remember a technology that was already there. It worked for us as well. So about software, I have another story to add. Look at this. You see this clicker? Now, how helpful is this for somebody who uses her hands to talk? I need both of my hands to talk, so obviously this was not designed for a deaf person. So if anybody is involved, and if a person who is deaf had been involved in the feedback, then perhaps there might have been a wrist clicker. Wouldn't that be fun to be able to, or maybe I could be 007, you know, James Bond. Just joking, but true. So I have another bit of advice for you, and it's related with your mindset, the mentality. The first thing is I really want you to think about the actual problem. What is the real problem? And the other is to consider including a culture of trying new things and learning from your failures. So again, I have an example, and again, I'm going to take you back to my control room. In my experience in life, in general, people who can hear think that deaf people can't do anything that has anything to do with sound on the job. Now, I always knew that I could work in the control room. It never even occurred to me that I couldn't, and I was ready to fight for it and to tell people that I could do it. But before I had a chance to do that, one day, my lead came up to me, or actually text messaged me and said, "What would you need to help you to work in the control room? Would you like an interpreter?" And I stood there dumbfounded. He actually asked me that. Yes, I said an interpreter would be helpful, and we talked about how we could make that room work for me. But I thought, oh no, I don't have to fight for it. My fighting spirit was taken away. But anyhow, it was very weird. I was so used to having to fight for everything, but this time it wasn't necessary, but it was very nice. And we talked with the control room people who are responsible for making the arrangements to set up the room. And somebody thought of that, remember that technology that had been created 20 years ago? And they said, why not we test this out. So there we were, and we were testing, and we tried to see if that worked. And along the way, while we were testing, I could see the interpreter's picture, but the one problem is that even though I could see them, I could not see myself. So I had no idea on when I was signing what space was being used and whether I was being cut off and whether I was putting my arms outside of the visual screen or not. So we worked it out. I consulted with the interpreter until I learned exactly what was the proper space that we needed to use, and every time I would sign, if they would miss something, then we would modify until we finally learned. So we added something that helped me to know exactly how to use it. So the example is showing, and perhaps you're wondering, what does that have to do with developing the mentality for? I think I want to first talk about identifying the real problem. The lead here recognized the real problem was the control room. It was not me. It was the control room and the environment. You see, he wanted to solve that problem. He didn't try to solve me or make me different or try to fix the fact that I was deaf. So he asked the right question. He got the real problem, we got the real solution. Now, when you make mistakes or you have failures, we just had a small one that had to do with my own picture in that screen. But what we learned from that is how to change, to take an old technology to make it new. And another thing, this was the first time there had been a deaf engineer in the control room. He was willing to try. And once we did a few things, we were successful. It was a big success because now there was a deaf engineer in the control room. And that was the right step. It was the right question. It was the right approach for success. Well, I've been going on quite a while here, and I think it's now time to wrap this up. So, assistive access technology can benefit everyone and is not restricted to people with disabilities. It can be developed from scratch and or emerge by utilizing existing technology. It's worth the investment, and consider universal design to potentially reduce the cost. And it becomes better when including people with disabilities during the design process, and develop that mentality for identifying real problems and apply lessons learned. I have one more slide to show you. So for those who are laughing, the reason for those who didn't see is that it's a meme that I created, and it's a picture, and it shows, it looks like it's a home, a living room with a couch and an easy chair. And the first thing that you notice is my mother. She's lying on the couch. She's got a huge pillow on her lap. She's got her iPad on top of the pillow and her earbuds in her ears, and she is crashed on the couch. And the second thing you notice is me. There I am, and I've got my glasses on, and I'm out like a light too with my crochet in my lap. And the words that are on this picture are, "Thank you for your attention," with a question mark, because we're both sleeping. But seriously though, thank you for your attention and listening to my presentation, and for being here, and perhaps I'll see you at the reception, and I hope I didn't put you asleep like these two people that you see on the screen. So Jennison, I'll turn it back over to you.
Johanna, thank you for not only an amazing presentation, but thank you for making it such an inclusive presentation. And yes, you absolutely do have a sense of humor. Just give me 1 second. I'm new to this award handing out business. Okay, on behalf of the Center on Disabilities at CSUN, and everyone else here. I want to thank you for joining us, for inspiring us through your keynote. And for some of us, it's things that we are also saying, but it's amazing always to hear it through different lenses. So thank you very much. Thank you. We're almost there. So there's a rumor that behind those doors that are closed is an amazing assortment of food and adult beverages for your networking pleasure. And remember, there were so many people here who said that they were here for the first time. So again, I'm hoping all of you who are veterans or who have been here more than once will take an opportunity to say hello to them. Join me, though, firstly, before we all leave, by thanking our sponsors. Without our sponsors, this is not an inexpensive production to put together. So without our sponsors, we wouldn't be able to do that. There's a whole host of sponsors. They're in the program book and such. So please join me in thanking all of our sponsors. And without making a mad dash for the doors, I invite you all to go outside, mix, mingle, of course I'm going to say network, and enjoy your rest of your conference. If you see me around, if you're a first-timer, please come by. I can give you some advice and things like that. But please enjoy the rest of your conference, and thanks for your time and attention.